This presentation will involve an overview of some of the tests that were taken in the 2017 to 2018 school year at Heritage Academy. This is Gray Cook speaking, and Danielle, my wife, and myself decided that we wanted to donate our time and some of our resources to Heritage Academy to help develop a bit of a physical culture. There was always already time for recess, but no formal physical education. We thought that any good intervention involves some degree of testing just to find out what baselines are. We did some balance testing at the very beginning of the year, and as you can see on the picture in this slide, standing on one foot and just sliding a box to the best of your ability while keeping that back foot flat on the deck is an excellent research-based test for a child's ability to balance, not only balance on one foot, but is that balance strategy equal on each side? As you can see, numbers got significantly better across a school year just by doing some of the normal physical activities that we recommended, which I'll talk about later. In the next slide, the same test is done for the upper body, and it looks at the way a child will use their posture and their core and their upper body strength to create stability. These are very reliable tests, and so when we see improvements across a school year, it can be assumed that balance and coordination and timing, as well as strength, have gotten better. If we look at the test from a pass-fail basis, the way to pass the balance test and make it body relative is to actually cover two of your own foot lengths with your reach on either side, and also not having a significant difference between either side, no matter how good they are. We had more fails than passes in the beginning of the school year, indicated in the blue column, and in the orange column, we demonstrated that had inverted by the end of the school year. We saw the exact same thing with upper body motor control in the slide that shows the pre-test was done in blue and the post-test was done in orange. Way more passes than fails in the end. One of the key fundamental things we saw is unnecessary and generalized stiffness in the ankle. And we feel in elementary school, this is a good predictor of maybe the most common injury that high school athletes and active participants engage in, and that's ankle sprains. And one of the predisposing factors to that is an ankle that's not mobile and throws greater stress on the foot and knee. As you can see, in the beginning of the year, we had a high incidence of children whose ankle mobility was so tight they couldn't even do the maneuver in the picture, getting the knee of their back leg up in front of the ankle bone of the front leg. This is a commonly used ankle mobility screen, and as long as there's no pain, it's a good indication of stiffness or great mobility. And as you can see, mobility got more acceptable as the year went on. Next, we also looked at a few certain movement patterns. Squatting is an excellent movement pattern to engage overall body coordination and development. And not being able to squat deeply or hips below knees, which is considered below parallel, is an indicator that there's some general stiffness or strength problems that probably need to be addressed with just general physical activity. Kids going through a growth spurt will also have an awkward stage with movement patterns, but they usually grow out of that. When they don't, it's something that sometimes needs to be looked into. At this early age, though, simple activities seem to have a very beneficial effect. This was one of our most concerning tests, that the inability to lift the leg isn't just an indication of, say, leg tightness, it's also an indication of core or abdominal weakness, asymmetry, or poor coordination. As you can see, we had a generally failing population at Heritage Academy in the beginning of the school year and passing the same test doing that. Shoulder mobility was the only test that went down, but there's a great explanation for it. It did not drop below a acceptable level, but kids with unbelievable shoulder flexibility got a little stiffer as a school year, but that's explained by the increased strength that we saw on the upper body tests that were done. Now, I just want to tell you, to get the results that we saw, many people would have an entire lesson plan and quite a few exercises. We consider doing exercises that target the physical test, practicing the test. And if your child authentically becomes a better physical version of their self, it should not be because we leverage the test. It should be that the test represent authenticity. So no exercises were introduced in class. And we simply looked at balancing activities and climbing and crawling and carrying activities. We did throwing activities with light objects and heavy objects like medicine balls, and we lifted awkward objects like sandbags. The interesting thing is Danielle and I, with our busy schedules, were only allowed to commit 1 day a week and barely average that. And at those sessions, no class had greater than 40 minutes of physical activity when we were teaching. We used obstacle courses and general physical problem solving to engage the kids. We realize that while watching each other perform different things, kids will pattern each other. And with a very, very open lesson plan, they patterned each other almost better than we could instruct them. Some kids had difficulty on some activities and some on others, but we simply let the weeks and months accumulate, and we saw each child having a lot of interest in the physical activity day, but because it wasn't one specific sport or activity, no kid had an advantage at every week. Danielle and I had a lot of fun coming up with creative ideas of how to engage the children and tried to allow, in as many cases as possible, some talk time at the end to simply discuss, if I didn't do well today, what are some things that could cause that, and what are some things I can do about that? We never identified problems, we identified potentials. And one of the things that we were worried about is this limited activity, is this limited physical education time 1 day a week and less than 40 minutes, is that enough? But what we realized is the children were introduced to different physical things, and in their 4 days of recess around their 1 day of physical education, they grew a wider opportunity with a little bit of equipment and a little bit of time, and actually helped mold themselves. We simply exposed them to balancing and crawling and climbing and carrying and running and jumping and landing opportunities, and we let nature take care of itself. We're going to try to do some of the same activities again. And one thing that we always appreciated is one of the determining factors of that poor ankle mobility test was simply the varying degrees of footwear we saw. Cowboy boots and Crocs are awesome, but for gym class, they're an accident or an injury waiting to happen. We did most of our classes either barefoot or in lace-up athletic shoes. We had no mishaps, and simply having the variety of more athletic footwear and barefoot balance challenges, children, I think, had an amazing opportunity to get better body awareness, better posture, and better balance, and it was measured. I appreciate you taking the time to look at this, and if questions arise about these tests, the beginning of the school year is a perfect time to have discussions about that. Once again, on behalf of my wife Danielle and myself, we were glad to help, and we look forward to opportunities to help Heritage Academy in the future.